Okay, so welcome to our Island Heritage session this morning, and we're going to answer the question, who was Mary Pittard? So we're going to give you a little bit of background and then hopefully we'll answer that for you. So we're going to talk about Newport, and we're going to talk about Newport in the 18th century. So at this time, Newport's a garrison town actually. We have got the barracks across Parkhurst, and all across almost towards Porchfield, in fact, was massive encampment for lots of different regiments. Century. It's a bustling port as well, the port of Newport. We'll see the clue is in its name. And it is the centre of commerce on the island, so it's a really bustling place to be. It's very prosperous as well at this time. So it quite a high population in terms of the island as well. And if I can show you this is obviously the Minster Church. It's Thomas's Square. We've got a carriage going through as well. Some of you might remember when this was a thoroughfare. And just remember when we did used to drive through the square there. And we can see sort of lots of clues really in the picture that tell us that this is a really prosperous place to be. Sort of couples there. Lots of well-dressed gentlemen and their ladies, and the carriage as well going through Newport. So it's a really busy, bustling place to be. By the 19th century, as we sort of move into the 1800s and Victorian era, although it's in our picture we saw those very lovely, well-dressed gentlemen, for working class families at this time into the 19th century, it's actually really quite hard, quite tough living for them. Lots of poorly paid jobs and people working long hours in all weathers, coming back to a really long day to the slum housing. They've got large families to look after, and it's a really hard time. Life was actually quite short for these working men, and we saw in fact quite a lot of widows actually becoming commonplace. Around this time, you might have heard of the tale of Valentine Gray, and there's a memorial to Valentine, this chimney sweep who was aged just 9 when he was unfortunately found beaten in an outhouse, beaten to death in one of these slum alleys off of Pyle Street. And he was taken from the workhouse, so we've got the workhouse now. He actually came from the mainland, not our workhouse, which you would find. The building, in fact, is part of current St Mary's Hospital building, if you were not aware. So he came from the mainland from a workhouse into employment as a chimney sweep at this really young and tender age, but he was very, very mistreated. So it's a really hard time for people in the 19th century. So this gives you an idea of the type of places people were living. You can see the streets here are just these kind of slum alleyways. So I'll give you an idea as to some points of reference here. So the church here and the memorial is here. So some of these buildings along here would be underneath the TK Maxx, and obviously previous to that the Co-op and Summerfields, you might remember there, and the current shopping centre and bus station here, car park, and then going down South Street, we've got Morrison's, Readers, Town Gate here. As I say, going down through Pyle Street is just along here as well. So that just gives you an idea of, you know, when we think of Victorian era and perhaps, you know, Charles Dickens and how he portrayed some of the streets and some of the places in London and things, we did have a similar, obviously not on a larger scale, but similar kinds of social issues here on the island. So one of these places was the notorious Tontine Yard, and this here shows a little plan of the yard, which was behind the Tontine pub, located opposite the old bus station, underneath the TK Maxx building. So I'll go back for you and I'll just point that out for you. So we think that the Tontine is somewhere here. Okay, and then the Tontine yard would look probably a little bit something down here. So there's another one of these yard areas for housing. And they were, say, very notorious places, and you would not want to go there after dark. And these are the kinds of places where these families with widowed families were living. So, you know, really not very nice places to be. This is the area now. Obviously, we were just talking about the TK Maxx building here. So just to orientate ourselves with what we're kind of currently seeing in Newport, this is what we would see today. And this is obviously not a 19th century depiction, but it shows what it may have looked like at that time. You can see it's quite closed in, and sort of older style housing on either side of the road. So we've got it quite open now, but it would have been quite a closed in area to be, and a very much a haven for ill repute and crime, and not a very nice place to have to grow up in, really. So around the time that this is happening, we are seeing the workhouse being used more to supposedly give people some kind of stability, and there isn't social housing, social welfare. So it is up to if you're not able to be taken into the workplace or the workhouse, excuse me, wealthy people who use their wealth and actually set up foundations and places where people who are living in these conditions to actually have some support and stability. And that kind of brings us on really then to our question. So who was Mary Pittis? Now, she was a lady who is of the Pittis family. You may know the Pittis family. And we've got the building in Key Street that she lived there when she was married to Richard Pittis. And that's 17 Key Street. You may know that as an older office of the council. In fact, they use that. So it's this, I'll get my pointer up for you. 1 second. So it's this building here that we're looking at. And this is where they would have lived, in Key Street. And you can see, can't you, in Key Street, quite a lot of these well-to-do villas, these places where people who were more wealthy, the stark contrast, if you will, between the earlier pictures that I was showing you of the slum areas in Newport, those very small, compact, crowded yards where families were living, to these with rather quite pleasant houses with a larger street and double fronted and lots of space, and less likelihood, I guess, for disease and contamination and things between living in those conditions. So this is 17 Key Street. So this is where Mary Pittis lived. And we're going to find out now what it was that she did in Newport. So she was considered to be a woman of very superior mind, genial disposition, very generous, open, thoroughly unselfish and ostentatious in all her intercourse with all, and she was one of those amiable fellow passengers in the journey through life with whom one feels quite at home in their casual meetings. So that's a really lovely description of her. So we kind of get a feel for this lady as being, it says, doesn't it, very generous lady. The next quote says, large was her bounty and her soul sincere. And this is part of her transcription for her my brain has gone slightly, sorry. So talking about her life, and it tells us that she was this very generous lady and did obviously something that's quite large to have actually had this obituary. Found the word there, sorry. So she's a lady of Newport who warrants remembering, I guess, really, and having this remembrance. So her legacy So what she did, actually, we remember back to talking about the prevalence of more widows at this time. She built in around 1860 a row of 6 almshouses for widows of the parish, and that's the parish of Newport. She had a monthly allowance set up for 12 widows to live in these houses, and the home was endowed in 1862. And if I can just show you here, I don't know if this is a view that anybody is familiar with on the call at the moment. So this is the houses here. Now, this building here is Ford Mill, and we're actually looking at the bottom of South Street, and I'll show you in a minute a picture of what it looks like currently today. Does anybody on the call know where this is? Might want to come off mute and just tell us where they think this view is of Newport.
I don't know it at all.
No, okay. So I will get my pointer off here and we'll move on. So, oh, we've got a map first, sorry. So the map here, so we're actually looking, I'll go forward, actually, that's better, isn't it? So we're actually looking at the bottom of South Street. So behind us is the turning towards Matalan, and we've got the cinema on the corner. So let's get my pointer up for you. So the cinema is here, so the road comes down, fire station, around and towards Coppins Bridge over here. So you may remember the Shoulder of Mutton pub that was demolished not so long ago, and that's actually cited in some documents relating to the almshouses. Unfortunately, one of the inhabitants died and there was an inquest held in the Shoulder of Mutton pub, so it is contemporary with the almshouses that were here. Now, they didn't go too long ago, I believe. There was still some housing along here, some later housing, and there were some archaeological studies actually done a few years ago that found some foundations and things for earlier buildings as well. So this sort of part of Newport would have been historically on the edge of town, and it was used for sort of industrial use in the medieval times, and then obviously into when Mary was able to build her almshouses here. So it was kind of on the edge really of the town boundaries. Let's take my pointer off. So if we look back at the map, again, we can see. So we've got Pyle Street along here. Remember I said under TK Maxx, those really cramped conditions. So people perhaps living in the Tontine yard here or the other yards across where we now find the car park here. So being able to then live down here on the edge of town, away from all the cramped, possibly, you know, disease-ridden conditions, to be able to move into these houses would have been a real luxury, I think, for some of these ladies who perhaps were not able to look after their families or themselves because they'd been widowed due to the conditions and the working life that these families were having to endure at the time. So kind of brings us on now to where we're at. So the Mary Pittis Fund is still a legacy fund, still working to support widows of the parish of Newport, which, when you think back to, you know, 100 years that that's been in existence, is really something. It's currently administered by Newport Congregational Church, and we're actually, as Age UK Isle of Wight, working with the Mary Pittis Fund, or through that, to create a project to support current widows. And we'd love to obviously look into Mary's life further and perhaps set up a project through this fund to support people through perhaps a heritage project, but also sort of just having that network together. So we might look at some perhaps wider things in Newport heritage, looking at the times, as I said, of Mary Pittis, going on a heritage walk perhaps, and then creating a little exhibition. So if you know of anybody who perhaps might fit the remit for this group, please pass on our details